Hey everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Combating White Supremacy Culture at Schools. So, for you all who may not know, I did the first episode over on Instagram Live last Tuesday, and then I realized that I enjoyed the Facebook platform a little bit more for this kind of conversation. So, that's why I've shifted over to Facebook. So, if you want to check out the previous week's episode, it is linked on Equity's Facebook page, and you can head over there and check it out. So I want to not take a lot of your time, but get to the point quickly for us because I know many of us have spent the day working in schools with children, and you deserve some time for yourself. Um, but this week, we are going to be talking about the characteristic of white supremacy culture called one right way. Now, one right way can show up as perfectionism, paternalism, and also objectivity. However, we're going to stick to the overall characteristic of the one right way today. And for those of us who may be watching this and don't know about right way, tongue twister there, the one right way is, that characteristic is about how, or the belief that there is a single way to do something. This belief can show up in all aspects of life. And in more detail, it is a belief there's one way to do things. And once you introduce someone to this way, they'll see this light and they'll conform, right? They'll adopt it and it'll become their way of doing things. And when someone does not adopt this right way of doing things, it's something inherently wrong with them instead of something wrong with the belief that we should conform to a specific way of doing something or idea. And a big example, I think one that many people can connect with, is missionary work. Now, what I'm not saying is that all missionary work upholds white supremacy culture. But what I am saying is that classically, or more often than not, missionary work is designed to go into a space, go into a community, and push the missionaries' belief onto that community, seeking to convert them to doing things their way. A more specific example of this would be Christian missionary trips into different parts of the world. That we saw and we continue to see happen, where the goal is to convert a group of people, devaluing their way of doing things, devaluing their knowing, devaluing their culture and their customs, because of the belief that there is a single right way to be religious, or there is a single religion that is better, more important than any other, and therefore we must go out into the masses, into various parts of the world, and shift their believing and their thinking. So with that overall, like that big understanding of white supremacy culture, I want us to now zoom in on what does this look like in a school, right? So for me, in my experience as a classroom teacher, this looked so many ways. But one of the ways that I saw it show up all the time is when we would teach children several ways to do something, like area model in multiplication, or multiplication and division in fourth grade. I most recently taught fourth grade, and in teaching them all of these different models, you have the area model, you have using place value, you have like all of these different strategies and tools. But when it comes down to assessing, a lot of times the assessments that were given to us to provide to our students in a particular, I won't name the curriculum, but in a particular curriculum, would require them to show mastery one way. And if they did not show mastery using that strategy, it was marked wrong or it was incorrect, even if the students were able to solve the problem. And the issue here is pretty obvious. Like if we think about it, how can we teach young people that there are several ways to do things, but then only only find their mastery in a single way, or their mastery is tied to being able to do something 6 different ways. In reality, many people aren't successful doing something 6 different ways. They find their way and they want to stick to it, right? They want to use what they know. They want to use the strategies, going back to multiplication, use the strategy that's most comfortable for them. That might be area model. That might be an array. That might be using a place value chart. Doesn't matter. They will arrive at the same answer, but a lot of times we penalize students for not being able to do something a specific way. So that's one way that the one right way would show up in my classroom all the time. And one thing that I did to combat this is I would allow my students to show their mastery. However, I would teach all strategies, but when it came to testing or assessing their ability to do a skill, I would accept whatever strategy that they found most comfortable, as long as they were able to explain either in written word or orally what they did. And that would show me that they understood, not necessarily making them show me 6 different ways to multiply. That's one way. Another thing that I would do in my classroom to combat this would be to model making mistakes, and not just modeling that a potential mistake, but when I actually did make a mistake and a student called it out, saying, you know what, you're right. Creating a community where we could hold each other accountable, creating a community where we're all positioned as learners, and I'm not using my positional power to really just hold myself in a higher regard or in a place of knowing more than the children in my classroom. Also, not just allowing this to happen, but celebrating when students find new ways to do things. One of the things I remember in my own K-12 experience was a 9th grade math class I had with Mr. Aaron, and Mr. Aaron made us or helped us learn to love math because he allowed us to create our own theorems. And as I reflect, like, he was a great model of what it meant as a teacher to, move away from one right way. He allowed us to create our own theorems, and he allowed us to share them with the class, and we could adopt our classmates' theorems or not. But he didn't hold himself in the positional power of knowing more and being more knowledgeable than anybody else in that classroom community. And I also want to offer something to the leaders that are watching this. One of the things that leaders often tell themselves, I found, is that they have to make the important decisions, right? And they know the right way. Some of them would believe or would say they know the right way, and we're going to do it their way because they attained a graduate certification in school leadership or school administration. And the challenge that creates, well, it creates many challenges when we're talking about positional power within a school building. But the greatest challenge there is you're positioning yourself similar to a missionary, right? Like, these teachers don't have the capacity or the skill set to know what's best for their students. These teachers don't have the capacity or skill set to know what's best for them or what they need to be successful. So I must, as a leader, I must determine how we're going to do things. And this is going to be the only way that we do things. And we're going to stick to this way of doing things because I know best. And that creates so many problems. One, it's likely that you are suppressing the leadership capacity of the other educators in your space, right? Two, you are diminishing the professionalism and the funds of knowledge that the children as well as the adults that work within this community have. They are brilliant. They are incredible, and just because they don't have a specific degree doesn't mean that they're not capable of making decisions that impact them and impact the overall community. So one thing I will offer to leaders is that I will offer that you try to move away from the belief that you are the holder of the greatest and the most knowledge in a space, that you are where the buck stops, and if you don't like that way of doing, it won't happen. And shift to more of a practice where you think and act as a group. You act as a person, not of hierarchical power within your building, but you act as someone who is sharing the power, and everyone's voice and opinions and needs are heard and respected. Shift away from hoarding the power. And I know that within traditional leadership models, we're often told, like, this is the person in control and in charge. And that may be the person who has to answer for decisions made, but that person does not have to be the sole person making the decisions. So as we wrap up today and you move into tomorrow, another day of teaching and leading, remember that there is not a single right way of doing and being or knowing. There are a multitude of ways. And it is important, as we aim to divorce ourselves from white supremacy culture, from dominant culture, it's important that we understand that there are a multitude of ways of doing things, and we celebrate that. We celebrate that with our students, with the young people that we work with. We celebrate that with the staff and the faculty in our buildings. And we also celebrate that with the greater school communities, inclusive of the parents, the community leaders, and greater community members as well. So we'll be back most likely next Tuesday with the next episode of Combating White Supremacy Culture in Schools. And I thank you all so much for spending some of your Tuesday evening with me and Equity as we do this work of creating more equitable and more sustainable learning ecosystems for Black and Brown children in our country. Have a good night, y'all.